I want to thank everyone for coming to this extraordinary exhibition and seminar on the life and work and really the genius of Lazar Khidekel, Suprematism, and the Russian avant-garde. The title of this afternoon is The Floating Worlds and Future Cities, which is the milieu that the YIVO Institute has always existed in. We have always existed a little bit above and a little bit in the future of what one actually finds on the ground. So today's event is perfectly in keeping with the spirit of the YIVO Institute. And I am Jonathan Brent. I'm executive director of the YIVO Institute, and I know we have many new friends in the audience today, so I will say a couple of words about YIVO before we go on to the rest of the program. As Marc Khidekel said earlier this afternoon, YIVO is something between a museum and a research institute, which is the truth. We were founded in Vilna, Poland, now Vilnius, Lithuania, in 1925 by emigre Russian intellectuals, Jewish intellectuals for the most part, who had met in Berlin and had devised the idea that there needed to be a national academy of the Jewish people of the diaspora. There was none. There was no real history of the Jewish people of the diaspora of Eastern Europe, the Pale of Settlement, and so forth, until Shimon Dubnov, Ansky, and various other scholars began to look into that history. And what YIVO did from 1925 until the outbreak of World War I was collect the largest single body of documentation of all sorts, from posters. We even have a box of cigarettes from the 19th century, Russian cigarettes, I might add, with it's very interesting box. To materials of the Baal Shem Tov. We have 14th century commentaries of Rashi. We have original manuscripts of Sholem Aleichem. We have letters of Marc Chagall. We have some works of Lissitsky. We have an extraordinary array of materials, including copies of the Balfour Declaration that were sent to the Rothschilds. The diaries of Theodor Herzl are in this building. It is a resource for scholars, for students, for the general public across the world, hoping to find information about who we are really as a people. And the YIVO Institute is the only institute in the world that is devoted to asking that question and trying to provide answers to it through research, through exhibitions of our materials. The one thing we do not have, I believe, is anything of Lazar Khidekel, which is strange, because Lazar Khidekel was a student of Chagall's, and Chagall was very close to YIVO in many ways, and often found himself in Vilna. I do not know whether Lazar Khidekel ever found himself in Vilna, though it's possible. But there is no imprint on this institution of him or his work, and there should be, because this is also a branch of Jewish artistic creativity and creative genius at the beginning of the 20th century that is simply non-pariah. It is simply at the highest level, the consummate level of accomplishment and quality. And it is that level that the YIVO Institute has always tried to maintain itself. Khidekel would have been quite comfortable, quite at home in this institute in the 1920s and 30s. And so it is with really great feeling of warmth and completion in a way that I welcome the Khidekels here, Marc, Regina, Roman, and the work of this great artist, Lazar Khidekel. Now let me say a couple of things about the exhibition. After the conclusion of our seminar, there is an exhibition and a reception. The exhibition begins on, and I know you're all going to forget this, but nevertheless, the exhibition begins on the 3rd floor, and it goes to the 2nd floor. And I think it advisable if you take the elevator to the 3rd floor and then come down to the 2nd floor to try to minimize confusion, which is inevitable in any case. But there will be people to help you find your way through this rather labyrinthine building. Catalogs of the show are going to be available at the reception that will take place on the mezzanine level, that is to say, the 2nd floor, after our speakers conclude. I want to thank Regina, Marc, and Roman for providing all of the materials and for making this event possible. I want to thank of the YIVO staff, in particular Krisha Fisher, who was indispensable in setting up the exhibition, Alex Brandwine, who, as always, is responsible for our materials, for the poster that you see in the hall, Suzanne Leon, our Director of Development, who is standing here, and to the rest of the YIVO staff for helping to make this possible. We have many, many distinguished scholars here today. Our first speaker will be Maria Kokori, Research Fellow of the Art Institute of Chicago. Maria?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and participate in this symposium. My lecture today will focus on teaching suprematism, Kazimir Malevich's teaching art practices at the Vitebsk Art School, and the influence that Kazimir Malevich's teaching system and philosophy had on his students, focusing on Lazar Khidekel. The artist Ilya Repin described Vitebsk as the Russian Toledo. Like Toledo, El Greco's celebrated Spanish city, Vitebsk was defined by its cathedrals, synagogues, churches, bell towers, and the rivers. In the first years after the revolution of 1917, the city, Vitebsk, was the center of an impressive explosion of artistic and intellectual life, and much of what was created at the time became a great part of the Russian avant-garde treasure. There is still something unique about Vitebsk. I don't know if you have been there, but I'm sure you would have the same feeling as I had. Still has these lovely churches. This is on your right, is Repin's summer house. It has old buildings, new buildings, and old constructivist buildings which are collapsing, synagogues that you could see now only the facades. And in the summers, the director of the Museum of Vitebsk organizes the summer screenings of, you could see Charlie Chaplin at the backyard of the museum. It's like being at Vitebsk, it's like being in a time capsule. It's like being, you feel like a time traveler participating in a Soviet film of 60s, whatever it means. The founder of the Vitebsk School of Painting was Yehuda Pen. Yehuda Pen was born in 1854. And he studied in Petersburg, and then he moved to Vitebsk, where he lived for 60 years. Yehuda lived in a big apartment, and where he also housed his studio. In the Penn School of Drawings and Paintings, that was the name of his studio, the educational program was organized across academic lines. They were doing drawing lessons, plaster castings, and studies from nature, plein air drawings. More than 100 students went to his school, And the list of names includes Marc Chagall, Osip Zadkin, Lazar Lissitsky, Polina Hedova, who later moved to London, and many other paintings. In 1914, one of Yehuda Penn's students, Marc Chagall, went to Berlin for his first one-man show exhibition, and then he returned to Vitebsk with a plan to stay there for the summer. But the outbreak of the First World War changed completely his plans, and as part of Marc Chagall's destiny, he had to stay at Vitebsk for almost another 6 years. A year after the October Revolution, in September 1918, Marc Chagall was appointed Commissar of the Arts in the area of Vitebsk by Anatoly Lunacharsky, and immediately he started the cultural renewal of his hometown. After organizing the decoration of the city for the occasion of the grand celebrations of 1 year after the October Revolution in 1919, Chagall's main goal was to create a professional art school and a museum, the People's Art School and the Museum of Contemporary Art. For that reason, for that purpose, a building was given, and this is how the building looks now. A building was given for this purpose by a banker to establish the art school, and some rooms were kept for its directors. 2 rooms were given to Chagall and his family, and later other teachers, they also lived in the school, including Vera Yermolaeva and Kazimir Malevich. And you can imagine how difficult it might have been to have strong personalities like Chagall or Malevich or Yermolaeva living and working at the same place day and night. The building is not a listed building. The ground floor is occupied by shops, but it's a very, very interesting building because they haven't renovated the indoor area. So you could still see the rooms where Chagall lived and Yermolaeva lived and Malevich lived and the famous staircase. Malevich arrived in Vitebsk in November 1919 as an established artist. Before that, Kazimir Malevich was in Moscow teaching at the Free Art Studios, the Zvomas. And it was the period between the October Revolution and when he went to Vitebsk. That period was very, very difficult for Kazimir Malevich. He had a very low income, almost non-existent, and he had no place to live, so he welcomed the opportunity to go and work at Vitebsk. Another reason is that Ivan Puni and Ksenia Bogoslavskaya, they were already there, and they were really good friends and colleagues of Malevich. So it was already a suprematist environment that could welcome Malevich to Vitebsk. His presence at the Vitebsk Art School electrified several of the young artists, and there is this famous story of Malevich entering and introducing himself to the young students that reminds me of Vassilitsk Gnedov poetry performances. That's a small parenthesis I'm going to make, but somehow I could see parallels in Gnedov's poetry and Malevich's entrance to the school. In 1913, Vassilitsk Gnedov wrote and published a poem anthology called Smert Iskustvu, Death to the Art, which consisted of 15 poems. All poems, as you could see on your left, all poems were labeled Poem 1, Poem 2, Poem 3, and they had one word title, or one line, one word, one syllable, or one letter. Apart from the last one, which was labeled Poem of the End, which is on your right, and it was untitled and empty. What is interesting with this poem anthology is that Gnedov used to present live readings of his empty poems. And according to, I'm not going to do it because I'm far too shy to perform poetry, but according to his audience, he used to lift his hand without saying a single word to the level of his head, and then draw circles in the air from left to right and vice versa. Ivan Ignatiev, in the introduction of the poem anthology, wrote that Gnedov once came out gloomy, exactly in the manner of Velimir Hlyebnikov. He was completely silent for a long time. Then he started moving his hands. He raised his hand and said with low voice, Все, that's all. Back to Vitebsk again. When Chagall announced to the students that they had from now on a new instructor, Malevich appeared in the staircase, and instead of introducing himself or say something, or even say his name, he started coming down the staircase, move slowly, silently, waving his arms in wide circles as he was moving. And obviously all young students, they were so much impressed that they later called these movements suprematist motions. So you could see the parallels with Gniedov, that's why I included his poem. These are the three rooms at the Vitebsk school where Chagall, Yermolaeva, and Malevich coexisted for a short period. Malevich guided two generations and two waves of artists, the first of which is known as the Supremacist Circle, included Margunov, Ivan Klyun, Lyubov Popova, Ivan Puni, Rozanova, Boguslavskaya, and Udaltsova. Although these artists, they produce works parallel to Malevich's own practice, and they use suprematism as a method to express their own ideas of color and form, unlike Malevich, the members of the Supremacist Circle supported suprematism only for a brief period and soon began to work in other styles. Between 1919 and 1925, a new generation of suprematist artists emerged who consider Malevich as a mentor and leader, like Lazar Khidekel, Ilya Chashnik, Nikolai Suetin, Lev Yudin, Vera Yermolaeva, Nina Kogan, Anna Leporskaya, and also Sergei Senkin and Gustav Klutzis. These artists were, for the most part, very young when they first began to work with or to participate in the group of Malevich in Vitebsk. The oldest one was Yermolaeva at the age of 26, and among the youngest one was Lazar Khidekel and Lev Yudin, being 16. As we were discussing with Marc and Regina, Lazar Khidekel loved to lie about his age. He always presented himself as an older, mature student. I'll show you later on his enrollment form, where he writes that he's 20 years old, although at the time he was 16. At the time that Malevich went there, the Vitebsk school was a well-established institution. According to the archives, by July 1919, the Vitebsk Institute had 600 registered students and 300 auditors, and its faculty already included artists who joined Malevich later at that year. And that's really impressive because they weren't just students that they became followers and students of Malevich, they were also teachers at the school that they joined the same group. Vera Yermolaeva headed the drawing and painting studio, Nina Kogan the painting studios, and Lissitsky the graphic and architectural studios. And here you could see Lissitsky in his studio, and on your right is Lissitsky with Kazimir Malevich. Malevich wrote a collection of rules and designed very carefully his teaching program. During the years, the almost 3-year stay in Vitebsk, that was probably the most productive period in Malevich's life. He participated with his students in 8 exhibitions, he gave several lectures, he participated in debates about the making and meaning of contemporary art, and he wrote and published some of his most important treatises on the new system of art, Suprematism 34 drawings, and God is not overthrown. Apart from the major meaning of this and importance of these books, in technical terms, these books are amazing. They were products of teamwork. They were using lithographic stones, and as the number of lithographic stones at the Vitebsk school was limited, they had to reuse the same stones to print on paper. So what they did is that they did the first printing, and then they had to ground the stone and use it for the next passages. And that means that the participants, obviously they had different handwriting styles, and also they had different skills of engraving the stone. And so these books, they are like the stamps of a teamwork. They look like the old Near East manuscripts, where you could see different handwritings in one page. The books, they also had a really impressive press run. For example, on the New System of Art, they produced 1,000 copies, and only a few of these copies have been survived. While in Vitebsk, Malevich, as I said before, participated in numerous exhibitions, he gave lectures, he wrote some of his most important books, he was a teacher, but the most important is that he founded and organized a collective group of artists, the Unovis, the Affirmers of the New Art. But what was Unovis? According to his students, it was a collective, a group, an organization, a political party, a program, an audience, a sect. Within Unovis, there were two committees, the Working Committee and the Creative Committee. The committees included members from the teaching department, Malevich, Yermolaeva, Kogan, and Lissitsky, but also Malevich students and his favorite students, Khidekel, Sweating, Yudin, and others. And here you could see, you could see the photograph upstairs. There are four students from left to right, Chervinka, Khidekel, Chashnik, and Yudin. All Unovis members, they had to wear the symbol of Unovis, the black square, that was a symbol of economy. And what is interesting with Unovis in terms of organization is that given the privileged position of the revolutionary collective in the history of collaborative artistic practices, it is worth remembering that if collective authorship was an oft-stated aim and goal of the avant-garde in the 20s, it was only rarely realized and practiced, and perhaps the most complex and the best-known example of such a collective organization and practice at the time was Unovis. By the summer of 1920, the fame of Unovis had already expanded and spread through Russia, and branches of Unovis were developed in other places, including Perm, Smolensk, and Orenburg. In 1920, as a group, they were very active. In 1920, for example, they reproduced the futurist opera Victory Over the Sun, and Nina Kagan produced a suprematist ballet for the Unovis member, and the Unovis member, you could see on the screen Lissitsky designs for Victory Over the Sun, and the Unovis members, they decorated the main buildings of Vitebsk with suprematist designs, and that was one of the first attempts to extend the suprematist principles into the public domain. You can see the decoration of trams. They make a plan of suprematist propaganda in the city, but they receive really bad critics in the press. I'm just quoting from one of the articles from a newspaper published in 1921. Why the cows are green and why horses are flying in the sky? Why? What has to do that with Marx and Lenin? The entire town has clothes in squares, circles, and triangles. It seems that things nowadays have become terribly primitive and ridiculous. The aim of Unovis was the complete renovation of the artistic world on the basis of suprematism and the transformation of the world through new forms. The Unovis group, they explore and develop further Malevich ideas, and they provide the new rationale for the suprematization by delineating areas in which suprematism can be used, and that included painting, design, drawing, sculpture, and architecture, and the aim was to suprematize the whole world. Searching and researching in Russian archives and archives in Vitebsk is not always an easy task. And that's one of my favorite photographs from the archives. There are tiny little pieces of paper bound together as a book and with different handwriting styles, but it's an incredible wealth of material related to, from simple details to politics and the way the school was organized, how Malevich insisted to improve the facilities while he was at Vitebsk. There is a very long correspondence between Malevich and Arkompros, where he complained about from simple things to very complicated things, the structure of his educational program, letters he exchanged with other teachers, their salaries. So all logistics, history, and program is there. These are enquetes, these are enrollment information of the students. The reason I included this one is because it's one of the students. In the political ideology, so they had to fill in with the date of birth, with their names, addresses, etc., etc. But what is interesting in this form is that in the political ideology, political beliefs, the student added Unovis. So for this student, Unovis was a political way of organizing things. And these are the two enquetes. This is from Chashnik, and the other one is Khidekel. And you could see that in political ideology, he wrote communism, the same with Chashnik, and he lied for his age. As I told you earlier, he wrote that he's 20 years old. Thanks to writings at the time and the Unovis Almanac, that was an anthology produced by students and teachers at the Vitebsk school, we could reconstruct the activities carried out by the artist. The nucleus of Malevich's teaching was the principle that artists should be soundly trained in the all-new art system, and that included Impressionism, Cézannism, Cubism, Futurism, and of course, Suprematism. I'm not going to ask you to go through the whole educational program, but according to Malevich, according to his teaching systems, the courses were to be practical and theoretical workshops with emphasis placed on the additional element. With the additional element, what he taught exactly, it was the mechanism by which one art style could go to the other one, or how an entire system of painting could pass into another. Malevich declared Impressionism, Cézannism, Cubism, and Futurism as key historical intermediates for the art of the future, and that was Suprematism. And departing from traditional academic approaches to teaching art, Malevich introduced an interdisciplinary framework where artist context and concepts, practices and materials, art and science, that were discussed and explored in correlation to artistic movements. He encouraged experimentation with new materials, with form and textures, and introduced innovative techniques in painting, design, and construction. On your left, you could see Malevich in front of the blackboard teaching his students, and on your right, there is a small drawing by Khidekel that you could see in the exhibition. This is a painting by Sweating from the Ludwig Museum. The reason I include this painting is that these are details under the microscope. If you see through the cracks, you could see that there is a black color everywhere. The way he painted this painting was in a negative way. He painted the canvas first black, and then he developed the composition, exactly like Malevich was teaching in his blackboard, which is really interesting. I found it as a very interesting example of experimentation with development of forms on a black background. These are copies from Lev Yudin's, another student by Malevich, from his diaries. Malevich, as I said earlier, they had to experiment with new materials, and he gave a huge emphasis on art and science. So they had to develop new facturas and experiment materials and define materials according to metallic, electric, or meteoric principles. Carborundum is a silicon-based material that was used in a radio in order to tune, to find the right tuning in the radios. And also all different, that was a material spectra, so they had to design different textures and relate these textures to different properties. And the properties, they were always organized in a very scientific way. And all these tables, and more of these tables that exist in the artist's diaries, they look like the periodic table of elements, like Mendeleev paintings. They had to invent the new materials, the new facturas, the new forms, and the new textures. As Malevich explained in his book on the new systems in art, published in 1919, geometrization of forms through straight and curved lines, as well as color and factura, they were key elements in Cubism and specifically Paul Cézanne's paintings. Later, Futurism added the motion, which, according to Malevich, created new dynamic forces. Malevich's notion of suprematism, guided by the principle of economic geometric expression. He declared that economy is the new fifth dimension that evaluates modernity of the arts and creative work. Line and circle, as you could see here in Lazar Khidekel's work, were explored in relation to form and texture, movement and space, as being characteristic elements of not of a design, but of a cosmic movement. And the relationship between straight lines and circles was corresponding to motion and energy in space. Lazar Khidekel, who came to study at the Vitebsk Art School in 1918 under Marc Chagall, he soon became a follower of Malevich. He joined Malevich's group of students and became one of the most active Unovis members. Under the guidance of Malevich, he studied all stages of suprematism, including linear suprematism, black and white, colored, three-dimensional, and cosmic suprematism. As evident in his early works that you will see in the exhibition later on, Khidekel mastered his teacher's methods and explored suprematism in many creative and unique ways. Khidekel's early studies were achieved by a balance of carefully designed geometric forms, creating a sense of two-dimensionality or three-dimensionality in accordance to Malevich's teaching system. In 1920, Khidekel, together with Chashnik, published the journal YIVO, which included projects and articles on the new art. The title suggests a new suprematist space that expands beyond the earth boundaries. It is like a transition to modernity, architecture, and also suggests the construction of a new world. In Khidekel's suprematist drawings for the YIVO exhibition, for the YIVO journals, which are now at the exhibition that you could see, despite the meticulous studies and almost the absolute geometry, the lines and the circles, they are very light, they are like weightless, and they create spaces expressing and organizing the area of the paper in a very different way. Somehow they express a cosmic dimension. And Khidekel's visual language of straight lines, simple geometric forms, and are unique examples of economy of means, and also they show his preoccupation with suprematism. The search for and discovery of line, form, and color, they were further exemplified in Khidekel's axonometric drawings, and his works demonstrates the manner in which architecture and painting are fusing together, and makes, according to my opinion at least, suprematism relevant to both material and immaterial world. In 1922, the Unovis group, headed by Malevich, they moved to Petrograd at the MHK, the Museum of Artistic Culture, and later at the State Institute of Artistic Culture, Ginhuk, where a research center was established for the study of new art. With the termination of Ginhuk in 1926, Unovis continued to exist only as a denomination and not really as a creative entity. Malevich's teaching at the Vitebsk School and the Unovis group offer one great model of collaborative authorship with its utopian aspiration for the national and international diffusion of suprematism and their collective practice, and also through their interest in art and science. Marc and Regina, they saw me books from Lazar Khidekel's library at the time he was a student at Vitebsk, and that includes Lobachevsky's geometry, books on physics, mechanics, architecture. So the interest in an organized way of teaching and expanding suprematism was really, really systematic and very scientific. In 1921, Rome wrote, "The suprematism must be more universal than Leonardo, more brilliant and perspicacious than Copernicus, and more inventive than Edison." This rhapsodical statement has particular resonance in the 20s and 30s, when artists dreamed of cosmic travels, of scientific achievements, of technological advancements, and as Lazar Khidekel proposed, of new floating worlds and future cities. Thank you.